doing? So I figured it was time for another video in my Living in RV series so I could give y'all some real news on what it's really like to do it. And I'm actually making this video from Michigan, which is where my husband and I are at on vacation. We're visiting some of his family, which I absolutely love. I had a few minutes this morning to myself so I could sneak off from the hotel room and make this video. And so I'm just sitting in this random backwoods dirt road in Michigan making this video. Kind of cool, huh? So anyway, so let's talk about RV living. Now, the first thing I want to stress to y'all is when you make this conscious decision to live full-time in an RV, what you've actually done is agreed to live this very minimalistic lifestyle. Because about the only thing an RV is going to afford you is food, shelter, and clothing. And it doesn't make a damn if it's a $200,000 motor coach that you're driving down the road or a little pop-up camper that you're pulling behind you. About the only thing you're going to squeeze out of this is food, shelter, and clothing. So when my husband decided that we were actually going to do this, we were actually going to go for it, I knew the first order of business was to get us a storage building because there were some things I didn't want to get rid of, but I knew that we couldn't take with us to the RV. So when I started calling around looking for storage buildings, I actually ran into this really unique problem. And that is where Oklahoma had had all that rain, which caused all that flooding. When the waters receded and people were actually able to get back to their properties, they salvaged what little bit they could and they put it in storage. That was the only thing that they had to do with it. Their properties were either uninhabitable, they couldn't move back in them, or the utilities had not been turned on by the utility companies. But for whatever the reason, they grabbed what little bit they had left after the flood and they stored it. So that kind of sewed up the market on the storage buildings. So when I started calling around looking for storage units, I found exactly one storage unit available in my neck of the woods, and that was a 5x10. And for you to get any idea how small a 5x10 is, I could stand in it and hold both of my arms out and touch both of the walls. That's not leaning one direction or the other. That's just in there with my arms out, and that's our storage building. So what that meant is that we were going to have to get rid of even more stuff than what we had originally planned on. Didn't have no place to store it. Couldn't take it with us. So as the Great Purge began, which is what I call it, you would not believe the shit that we sold, gave away, donated, and threw away. You know the big black contractor bags, which are like 55 gallons. I'm talking just bags and bags and bags of stuff. The Great Purge is what I came to call it. But as I started going through my stuff and I started getting rid of stuff, I developed this attitude. Even though I had as much say-so as my husband did on this decision, even though I agreed to it just as much as my husband did, for some reason, when it came down to actually execute this plan, I had attitude. Man, I was going to have to get rid of all my shit. Didn't want to. Like one of the things I had spent the last 25 years collecting was mismatched pieces or plates of fine porcelain china or bone china. I would go to a thrift store or a garage sale and somebody else would walk past that porcelain plate thinking it was worthless because it wasn't in a complete set. But I would know that is a pattern that they hadn't made in 50 years. Man, I'd snatch that thing up. So as the Great Purge began, and I'm having to get rid of way more stuff than what I am comfortable with, get this attitude. And I walk around with this attitude for a few days, and I'm just snappy. You know what I'm saying? Just irritable. Now, I'm not telling anybody what I'm thinking. It's my thoughts. They're for me to have. You know what I'm saying? But I felt like I was giving up my hobbies or my interests or pieces of myself, you know? So I walk around with this attitude for a few days, and I finally had to have a talk with myself. And I said, self, exactly how many plates do you need to eat off of? And exactly how many pairs of black sandals do you need? And exactly how many different shades of blush do you need? Is it possible, self, that you have lived with abundance for so long that you don't even recognize it anymore? And so once I kind of started putting things into perspective like that, it actually made the purge easier. So ultimately, what we wound up putting in our storage building was my plastic totes with all my photos, extra blankets, sleeping bags, winter clothes, our emergency zombie apocalypse food, because I told you I pretty much turned into a prepper. All my cast iron, because I wasn't about to get rid of that. Basic, just some seasonal necessity stuff. Clothes. You would not believe the tons of clothes that I gave away and then I donated. Same thing with my husband. Same thing with the kiddo. Cooking utensils, dishes, plates. You only have so much room in an RV. And if you're going to store a plate, it means you're not using it. And if you're not using it, probably means you don't need it. So anyway, we get through the Great Purge and my attitude kind of tones down just a little bit. And I can assure y'all, I have the ability to get a shitty attitude. But anyway, so we've been in the RV for a few days and some of the chaos had kind of settled down just a little bit. And we were actually starting to get into a routine of this small space living. And I was enjoying it more and more. So after we'd been in the RV for about a week and a half, I was sitting outside one night underneath my RV awning, looking at the stars. And I had this emotion sweep over me that I wasn't even expecting. I didn't see it coming. And what the emotion was a sense of a feeling of complete liberation. Because it hit me that I no longer had all this shit that I was responsible for. I no longer had all this stuff that I had to maintain or repair or protect or put up or wash or I had purged a lot of responsibility out of my life. And I actually felt so liberated. And I didn't expect that feeling. And followed up right behind that is I had like this epiphany. And what that was is I realized that I actually hadn't got rid of anything. What I had truly done was clear a bunch of crap out of my life to make room for what mattered the most. I now had freed up some room, mentally, physically, responsibility-wise. I had freed up some space for what meant the most, which was my hubby, the kiddos, and the critters. And it just so happens to be that is exactly what made it to the RV with me. It just so happens that my hubby, the kiddos, and the critters made it through the Great Purge. So the moral of the story is, I'm learning every day. And I guess you can teach an old dog new tricks. So anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Another video to come next week. Bye, Felicia.